Hello and welcome back to another video on reptiles brought to you by myself, Mark Perpetua from Reptile Encounters, and my good friends at Hudson Valley Reptile and Rescue. Today we're going to talk a little bit about naming animals, and I don't mean picking the right name for your pet. I mean the names that scientists use when they're describing different types of animals, like a turtle versus a tortoise. But the thing I want to talk about first is the classification of all organisms. All organisms, living things, are divided into what we call kingdoms. And kingdoms divide organisms from very, very diverse groups, from bacteria to plants to fungi and to, of course, animals, which is what reptiles belong to. Scientists use 7 main categories in the science of taxonomy in order to show how groups are related to each other, not just on their similarities of appearance, but also their evolutionary relationships through common ancestry. And as we get further and further down the list, our groups get smaller and smaller until we get to a word I'm sure everybody's heard of, a species, which, as it sounds, means the specific type of animal we're talking about. So let's go over those 7 categories first. We start with kingdom, and as we said, these reptiles belong to the animal kingdom, but so do worms and sponges and sea stars and jellyfish. But those are all animals without a backbone. Reptiles are animals with a backbone and specifically a nerve cord. So they belong to a phylum of chordates or chordata, but we often just refer to them as the vertebrates. So if we take our kingdom of all organisms, we can separate it into the vertebrate phylum, which then has to be further divided and narrowed into classes. Is it a fish? Is it an amphibian? Is it a mammal, a bird? Or is it a reptile? So now you know when you are using the word reptile, according to the field of taxonomy, you're talking about a group of vertebrate animals. But then all reptiles are divided into orders. You know, as far as being a reptile in the same class, these turtles would still be related to things like alligators and crocodiles, snakes and lizards, and a very rarely heard of reptile called the tuatara. But we could take all reptiles and divide them further into groups called orders, and that's where these guys come in. The order Chelonia is the order that includes all of the shelled reptiles. And we have turtles and tortoises, which can then further be broken down into families. And that's where we see here. They have a certain relationship by being in the same order, but now we are representing 3 different families of the order Chelonia. To my left here, sitting patiently because it's out of its favorite environment, which is water, is the alligator snapping turtle. And it, along with our common snappers here in New York, belong to a family of turtles we call Cheladridae. Over here in my right hand, we have a tortoise. And all tortoises belong to one family, the Testunidae. If I said that right. Yeah, these words are really complicated because they're all written in Latin, which is why nobody wants to use them every day. But they chose Latin because it's a language that nobody uses every day. And therefore, it's really hard to mess up. And it can help scientists communicate from one country to another, speaking in different languages. And then, of course, the turtle I'm holding right here on top is a turtle known as the red-eared slider. And it belongs to a family of turtles called Amididae, another tough one. And that is all the pond turtles of North America and Europe. Altogether, there's 14 different families of chelonians. So they can be divided into many, many different groups. But I got a tortoise here that doesn't want to sit still, and I got a lazy alligator snapper that's kind of in the way. So let me go ahead and put a few things back. All right, now that we put the tortoise away, I have a new turtle in hand. This turtle actually belongs to the same family as the one in my left hand. Again, this is the red-eared slider. The one in my right hand is a very common turtle seen here in New York, probably the most common turtle seen here in New York, called the painted turtle. And that brings up an interesting topic. Sometimes when we're using common names, they can get messed up from time to time, either mispronounced or misinterpreted. And I got a lot of people that call these painter turtles. And I do believe the name painted turtle is because it looks like somebody painted the marginal scales with those beautiful red markings. When I think of a painter, I think of somebody actually holding the brush, which I've never seen a turtle do. But is the common name really that important? In the world of science, in order to communicate with scientists around the world, we already mentioned that we use these scientific names in Latin. So once we get through the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, now we talk about the last two categories, the genus and species. And together, those two words are used to give every living thing its own scientific name. I like to think, since there's sometimes many members in one genus, think of it like your last name. Sometimes you're asked to write your last name first. So a genus can even have a few or many species within it. These two guys happen to be from different genera. The red-eared slider scientific name is Trachemes scripta, while the painted turtle's name is Chrysamis picta. So again, we're dealing with Latin terms. So whether it's a painted turtle or a painter turtle, as long as you know what your neighbor is talking about, what they saw in the creek, if I was communicating in a scientific paper with other scientists around the world, or even different parts of our own country, this animal would be universally known as Chrysamis picta. And a lot of people like to use those names when they're including description of even their pet reptiles, as we're trying to become a little bit more knowledgeable about the reptiles we keep. So I think it's really great that people are using them, but I also just wanted to give this little video on taxonomy so we have a better idea of what those names mean, where they come from, and what degree of relationship they show among the different types of animals we work with, not just reptiles, but whether it's birds or if you have a pet dog that's a mammal, they all have a degree of relationship. I think one word that's overused is family. And sometimes really when we're showing relationships, they may be in the same order or the same class. Another problem that I hear sometimes used is people will say, well, they're completely unrelated. According to this scheme of taxonomy and our good friend Charles Darwin from the mid-1800s, everything is related if you dig back far enough to find its common ancestor, which means even though I'm a mammal and this turtle here is a reptile, we're still both vertebrates and would be classified in the same kingdom as animals. And I do like to believe I got a little bit more in common with this turtle than I do a dandelion growing in the backyard. So as you can see, relationship really depends in what level of classification we want to look at. And now we have a better understanding as to how those groups work and why we use scientific names. So thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed that little review of high school science class, and keep an eye out as we have more videos in store for the future.